Okay. So just walk us through this real quick, Mr. Small. If I'm looking at this correctly, 11, 12 claims.
First page is the claims with the average cost per claim for the period 11, 12 through 15, through January of 15. Looks like you're averaging in the neighborhood of 11,000 claims per 12-month period.
Got about $3 million a 12-month cycle. So where did they come up with the $4 million that we were talking about the last time we were here?
This first page is your, that include everything?
That might not include the, no, wasn't it that we have 4 million in claims, but some of them were over the 100,000 and were paid for the
I'm
catastrophic?
just comparing here, the 2011, 2012, they originally gave me at 3.9 million. And this number comes in at 2.8. So you're about $1 million under on all periods. So that could be something actual paid versus claim submitted to the stop loss.
Lauren, what Samara was saying was that the top of the page says this excludes claims
50,000 plus.
over 50,000.
Right. So the second page is by the procedure code that we had discussed with the representative from the EIU. And the last page is your prescriptions. Question is this the data we're looking for? Do we want different data? Do we want more data? Which moves you to the second part. Do you want to utilize a consultant to dig deeper?
Do you have an estimate? I mean, I saw he gave us an hourly billing rate, but did you have an estimate, or did he provide an estimate of what he thought it would actually cost to perform that audit?
No, he didn't on this, but we wanted to know exactly what we wanted to do based upon the proposal, the backward. Do you want the whole menu, or do you want to delete some?
I mean, the purpose of going through this exercise was to kind of take an analysis and see exactly what our claims history has been, what we're paying out versus what we're paying into the health trust in terms of premiums every year, and then make a determination as to what was best for the school district going forward. I'm not sure the information we got clarified for me exactly what our claims payments have been, because I'm not sure we're looking at an apples-to-apples comparison to the information we had prior.
And we could certainly go back to the IU and ask for some of these other areas, for instance, how the stop loss contract plays into the claims on our own.
Yeah.
If that's the direction we want to take this.
No, that's the. I'm not even sure it matches up with the. Looking at a document we've been provided before, we're 12, 13, 13, 14, and 14, 15. We were paying about $5 million a year in premiums.
We're paying, okay, in premiums, correct.
Right. And this is telling us we're spending $3 million a year in claims. But as Tamara points out, is this all encompassing in terms of the claims, or is this just...
It's excluding anything over 50,000.
Right, and those are the ones we really want to see. I mean, the big ones are the ones that are going to influence So I suppose if they could provide us with, total claims costs, that'd be helpful.
If we could make this report, guys, with the one from the 28th of January,
And then in terms of bringing in a consultant, I actually think it's probably a good idea. I mean, this is taking a long time for us to dig into this and get the answers that it's very difficult seems to get the information that we're looking for from the health trust, in my opinion. And the consultant may have a better idea as to what questions specifically to ask so that we get the right information that we're looking for.
and I have one other firm that I'm trying to reach to provide a similar proposal.
What do the rest of the community think of that proposal for bringing in a third party?
I'll be honest, I don't think I saw the proposal. I think, was that attached to the same email?
Came out today, check an email to me today.
Okay,
It didn't go on Thursday yet.
okay. I think it makes sense that we need somebody to help us figure out the benefits, the Cadillac, how everything, all that's gonna play in, give us some advice. I mean, I don't know if that's the consultant, if we can kind of maybe look that over and make a recommendation for the voting meeting in 2 weeks.
Essentially what this proposal is, it's to agree to conduct an evaluation of the current financial arrangement of the Daniel Boone Area School District Plan with the Berks County School Trust. It would include a review of 3 to 5 years of claims history, review of the current terms of the stop-loss contract, obtain and provide details on Berks County Trust administrative fees and fixed costs, evaluation of the trust funding policy, which is used to set the annual rates, and provide cost projections for other self-funded options, independent and other consortiums. Hourly rate of $175 an hour.
It'd be nice if we had some kind of estimate of hours of what does this usually take? But has he done this for any other areas?
I think this is they'd done some work up in your old neck of the woods, is that correct, Mr. Small?
Yeah, he had references in, when he met with us that day from other districts down in the Carlisle area.
I think the problem with an estimate of hours is if he has as much trouble getting information out of the IU as we've had, it's hard to say how long it's going to take. And all you're saying at this point, Mr. Small, is that we commit to this analysis that he wants to do, that we wouldn't commit to anything longer than that until we find out what the analysis shows and what he thinks he can do for us. Is that correct?
That's correct. You could certainly move ahead and have him give you initial report and within a month and see what he produces.
I mean, the good thing is that he would cut out the IU part, and we just give him permission to go directly to
You
Ross.
require a letter from us
Yeah.
to this PATH organization that handles our claims, that enables him to dig into our data.
And I think it's a worthwhile endeavor.
I agree.
So we'll make a recommendation to the full board then? Okay. 5-year budget update?
Okay, 5-year budget update is very similar to where we were. We haven't made any major changes. The only big change was as a result of us finding that we had some additional, I believe we had this the last one for our federal side. Nothing is reflected in your current spreadsheet as it relates to the presentation from the governor last week. If you haven't seen that, I took that copy along. The big, aside from the basic ed increase, is in special ed. We haven't had a special ed increase in nearly a decade, and they're indicating that this year there's going to be an increase. In our case, It amounts to approximately 318,000. So, aside from that, as we move forward this month, we're fine tuning the budgets for the 15-16 year. And we'll be coming forward because you're going to need to adopt a preliminary by April, May at the latest for 30-day window for final adoption. By then, we should know more as it relates to how any of this might play out, both 15, 16, and moving forward. I will say as well that the details regarding the tax reduction proposal that was part of the budget simply aren't out there yet. It obviously is tied in somehow to gaming revenue in order to make all this work, but with Act 1 of 2006 playing into it, a lot of questions on how this $9.1 million that is posted out there for gaming with Blue can come into play. Not that that would, well, I say it wouldn't be a part of our actual budget, it could be, because depending on how the legislation that's tied to this comes out, could impact millage one way or the other. So I'm just being very hesitant to even talk about that until more details are out there.
Just one question on your update. At the facilities meeting last Monday, it was discussed about blacktop, sidewalks, driveways, all the work that's going to have to be done. Has that money been built into the 5-year plan?
To some degree, keep in mind, year-end last year, we moved some dollars that would become a part of the capital reserve fund too. So there's maybe $250,000 there that will help out with it. Yes, there will be, as we move forward in this 5-year plan and in the 19-20 year, because we're already looking at that, there will be dollars earmarked for capital improvement.
Do you guys know offhand how much we brought in last year or this year so far on demand in the demand response program? Do you guys know offhand? I mean, I know that's kind of a question out of the blue, but
We just got a check for $5,900,
For what time period?
the last 2 quarters, I think. I don't know what we got before that.
I'd have to get that for you.
I was just curious.
I'll get that for you in a moment.
We do plan to continue with our 4-day work weeks in the summer, which
Right.
does help as well.
I'm sure he's got that built in here.
I don't know if he does or not. I would hope.
All right, so I don't see many changes here. I guess the only question I had for you, Mr. Small, was in the line items here, I think it's, you had gaming revenue, 1.2 million in 14-15, and then it's blank, the rest. Is that because it was allocated in those funds coming from the state were allocated into different blocks?
Until we get the official word on May 1st that there is an allocation for gaming, it remains up under local revenue, under your local taxes. Because it's part of local taxes. Okay? Once we get the verification on May 1, the amount of it, then we move it down and it becomes state revenue and we reduce it in the local revenue.
Okay. Do you guys have any questions? No? Okay, something we've seen 100 times already. All right. Moving on to the building closure. Can you guys go through, I know you guys put together this slide deck that had, for the benefit of the public, this slide deck talks about, or I guess does an analysis on enrollment projections, building on what Tim Seldenbridge had worked for us on last year. That was also part of our presentations to the public with our 14-15 budget. So if you guys can go through the slide deck and just sort of talk about how it is you guys put the numbers together, what the numbers are, how they're represented, I think that'd be beneficial to Is everybody here?
Did I actually see that?
Is there a way to turn off that first bank lights, or are they all connected? That might help. Maybe not.
I thought we could just do one.
Okay.
Good evening. Michael Miller, Assistant Business Manager. This presentation will be on enrollment projections for the next 5 years. This first graph shows the birth counts for the two townships and borough that make up the Daniel Boone Area School District. You see, going from 2005, they've been steadily declining. In 2012, had the lowest level at 182 births. And 2013, it recovered a little, about 210 births. This graph breaks out between the townships and the borough. And again, you see the decline, mainly in Amity Township. This slide breaks out population counts, enrollment population for Pennsylvania burghs and local. Population-wise for the school district has remained stable between 2010 and through 2013. It increased a tiny bit, 0.13%, 11-12, 0.38% in 12-13. Moving below that, the school-age population in Pennsylvania has actually declined last few years. 12-13 it was down 1.23%, and 13-14 it was down 0.86%. And moving on to the last section, public school enrollment. It has been essentially the flat in Pennsylvania the last few years. In Berks County, the data available, it declined 0.28% in 11-12, 1% in 12-13, and about another 1% in 13-14. And that brings us over to the school district. 11-12, down 1.63%, 12-13, about 2.74%, 13-14, it was 4.36%, and 14-15, it was 2.58%, which it's in line with the county and decreasing, but the county's been about 1%, whereas the school district's been greater than that. In this slide, to really understand this slide, I don't know if I can explain it now to truly understand it, but this is what the analysis is based on. For the first line, the kindergartners, it's based on the first 5 years prior to the year. So basically, when you look at 1 year and look at the kindergarten number, it's basically the number that was over or under the amount of births that were in the Daniel Boone Area School District. And then the first through 12th grades is the number that went on to, so for instance, let's take an example. So 2009-10 first grade, you would take the kids enrolled in that first grade and divide it by the 8-9 kindergarten, and you would get a percentage. So the first grade through 12th grade are all calculated as such in the same methodology. And these statistics are standard methodologies for calculating what's known as cohort average survival ratios. And taking what I've done is taken the last 4-year average of these ratios, and with that you can take the birth rates and take these cohort survival projections and calculate out and make some enrollment projections. Here's a slide on historical enrollment. The district topped out in 2009-10, 3,979 students, and has been steadily declining ever since that date. I'll give you a couple seconds to review the slide. And here are the enrollment projections for the school district. The 14-15 year was taken, the enrollment at the end of February, which was 3,505. And using those cohort average survival ratios, the birth rates of the 5 years prior, this is an estimate of where the school district would be 5 years out each year. Keep in mind that the birth rates are down. They've been hovering about 200 a year, and the average survival ratios have averaged out to be less than 1. So starting with 200 kids, for instance, starting with 200 kids for kindergarten, as they go through the 12 grades, there will be slightly less kids every grade based off these projections. 15-16 should be right near just under 3,400. 16-17 just above 3,300. 17-18 would be 3,168. 18-19 3,041, and 2019-20 2,930. And this is a slide I just want to say that housing starts are taken into account in this projection as well. I taken data from the data that is available for past years, plus discussions that have been at supervisor meetings to get a general feel about how many housing starts will be in the 2 townships in the borough going out. And this is my best guess at the moment. And using a statistic of about 2/3 a student for each housing start, it adds about 11 students each year up to 2016, and about 13 students from 2017 on. And it rounds to about 1 student per grade. And this is a projection from the PDE. It is it's old. It's about a year old, but and I'm not sure of the methodology used by the PDE, but the PDE does show declining enrollment.
I'll let you drive, I'll walk through it. So this is a graph of the data that's been provided by the business office as it relates to enrollment and capacity. So the blue line is our enrollment dating from 1999 going forward. The red line is our capacity in terms of the buildings that we have. The vertical red line is where we are today. So if you click the button, what you'll see up there is we had a capacity with Monocacy Kindergarten Center, APC, BEC, middle school and high school of about 4,000 students back in 1999. In 2001, we added AIC. If you click the button, Mike, click it again. And that brought the enrollment up, or the maximum capacity of our buildings up to 4,752. Moving forward in 2007 and 2008, we sold the Monocacy Kindergarten building and added the Monocacy Elementary Center, and that increased our capacity up to 4,800 students, if you could click that one more time, which provided us an excess capacity of about 947 students, which equates to about 2 different buildings. If you look at the space to the right of that red vertical line, those are the enrollment projections going forward. And it takes you down at 2019 down to this 2,930 students. So the question I think the board and the community needs to think about here is, with all this excess capacity, is there a need to keep these buildings open and running and staffed? It's a lot of costs that are built into that. You click to the next slide. This is a graph that shows enrollment versus actually utilized capacity. And the orange line, if you click it again, represents what we did in terms of the use of the building. So in 2008-9, we closed APC, which reduced our capacity by 300 students per year while the renovations were taking place. And then APC was reopened again increasing capacity for 3 years, at which point we closed it one more time. If you could click the slide one more time. Okay? And that brought the capacity back down to 4,572 students, which is where we are today. Now, I guess as I've been looking at these numbers for the last 5 or 6 years, it strikes me that when we closed APC, we saved $666,000 in costs. And back in 2007 or 2009, when we closed the building for renovations, the question came up at a board meeting: should we reopen? And we looked into what the costs in terms of savings would be. And at the time, the only number that was generated was a savings in utility costs and maintenance costs, which was about $80,000 a year. No further look or due diligence was done to determine what savings would be realized in terms of HR. We had a lot of duplicate personnel in the district because we have to staff each building with certain people, whether it was librarians or nurses or secretaries or custodians and so on and so forth. And the board at the time decided to reopen the building, and for 3 years, I think we spent, well, as we found out later, $666,000 per year that we really didn't need to. And so I think what I'm asking the board to do is kind of take a look at our enrollment versus the capacity we have, and think about what is the appropriate thing to be doing in terms of our building space. Is it the prudent and financially responsible thing to do is to close an additional building and realize those savings, because we do have some larger issues that we face going forward, not the smallest of which is our PASERS liabilities. If you click the next slide. Yeah, one more time. This would represent the closure of the Monocacy building, which would bring the capacity down to 4,112 students in terms of the overall capacity, which is still 700-800 students more than what our actual capacity, our actual enrollment numbers are. And if you put that in context, 800 students, I mean, that's this building and the Monocacy building combined. And if you take a look at our past history, even at the highest growth rate, it would take 4 or 5 years before you would reach the capacity of those of having Monocacy building closed. If enrollment suddenly were to spike going forward and start increasing at a clip of 200 students per year. And we still own these buildings. It doesn't take much to open a building up again if we think there's a need. And going forward, although it's not on the table for discussion tonight, but I think the community needs to be aware of this and the board should be thinking about this, is if enrollments continue to do what we're projecting them to do, we ought to be thinking about 2 or 3 years from now perhaps closing another building. You hit the last slide. Keep going. Again, still well above the total enrollment at that time. However, it's providing a cushion for any future growth. But again, we're not talking about selling buildings, we're just talking about closing a building. And the cost savings to the school district could be millions of dollars per year. millions of dollars per year. We have a Peaser's liability coming up of over $3 million per year above what we currently are paying. If you click the next slide. One more time. This is the Peaser's liability that we're facing going forward. 14-15 budget is about $5 million a year. 18-19 budget is in excess of $7 million a year. Now, these additional costs are not going to go away. As a board and as a community, we've got to figure out how do we pay for this going forward. Where are you going to come up with an extra $2 or $3 million per year? So I think it's something as a board we need to consider. We need to think about reducing our overhead, reducing our costs. And if we have capacity, we have buildings open that we don't need open, I don't see a need to move forward with keeping those buildings open, particularly if we can consolidate in the existing facilities that we currently have. So I'm open for some suggestions or feedback. We had Mr. Small look at our overall building costs. Monocacy's costs about $890,000 per year, and I believe Birdsboro costs us about $860,000 per year to operate. Oh, I'm sorry, those numbers are not correct. Let me pull up that master spreadsheet. I was looking at the benefits. So I didn't get a summary on here, but I'll do that real quick. Monocacy, I think we were spending about $7.7 million in costs for the Monocacy building. Now that takes into consideration all the the positions, including faculty, staff, clerical positions, energy costs.
Excuse me,
Yep,
which slide are you talking?
I'm looking at the spreadsheet you sent to the board. Yeah, this one right here. Oh, I'm sorry. Is that the total number up there? That includes everything? 4 million? And then you break it out separately below? Okay, so it's $4 million. And so I guess the question is, in terms of if you're consolidating the buildings, teachers are moving to different buildings, some clerical staff are going to be moving to different buildings, but there's going to be some savings in terms of energy costs, there'll be some savings in terms of custodial staff, there'll be savings in terms of clerical staff, and there'll be some consolidation of classrooms and things of that nature, and I think there'll be some synergies that could be realized, similar to what we realized when we closed this building down, that would save the school district a significant amount of money going forward. We have yet to quantify that, and quite frankly, the business offices are going to spend a lot of time on that unless the board thinks this is a good idea to pursue and do the due diligence that would be required to get the answers that we're looking for. Any comments from other committee members?
I have a few, but I prefer to hear Mr. Brent and Mr. Dasky first.
I guess to start off first, we certainly have been talking about this in the finance committee for a while now. But I was a little disappointed that you did bring it up at the last board meeting, kind of out of the blue. I thought as a board we would kind of pass that stuff, but that's neither here nor there. Obviously, I think it's something to consider, but I don't think that this is the correct time to do so. I was looking at the information you sent out because, again, we're talking about bringing 5th grade into the middle school. I know one of the districts that you had sent out a questionnaire about, that they had done a questionnaire, Their comment was that this was a minimum 12 to 18-month process to make sure that the public was aware of what's going on and we had buy-in along those lines. I also have to question, a lot of them did specifically say that the fifth graders had some kind of separation from the other children, so what costs would be involved, if any, at the middle school for that. Then my other thought was, we are dealing, we're not producing a widget. Our product is taking young boys and girls and hopefully turning them into a fruitful society, whether it's college or trade or whatever it may be. And we're talking about probably one of the most, a child obviously, it's one of the parents' hot buttons. So we're going to close Monocacy, and then the idea is 3 years later we're going to reopen it and close Birdsboro. I just don't like the idea of shuffling the kids around. Again, if the closure is necessary, I think we just pick the building and down the line, when it gets to that, we close it. I also have a question I was looking for. I know it was sent out to us, but I couldn't find it on my fingertips here. But so I know that the total capacity we have versus the students we have was it 800? You said 850 or over, or
More than that, yeah.
so what percentage per school is that? I know some of our schools are at 90% or over in capacity. And, capacity is one thing, and that's how many kids we can actually fit in the building. Does the building work at capacity? Yeah, it'll work. I don't know that's the optimum place to be. So while some schools are well below, I think we're tight in the other areas. So I guess yes, we have a large capacity, but once it all gets shuffled around, what percentage will each building be at capacity? And I guess finally, my last comment is, I know Mr. Small and his department over there, I think have been doing a very good job at, we've done some bond refinancing. We found items in our maintenance area, and Casey's been part of that. We have some questions that have come up in the busing contract. Mr. Small has been finding items that we've been either overpaying or why are we paying for. So my other concern was, if now we're going to have them running around like chickens with their heads cut off for the next couple months trying to get the numbers we need for this, does that divert them from real savings? So those are my comments.
Good comments. Thank you. Appreciate that. I do have, you have the spreadsheet that we had forwarded around with all the current enrollment with the capacities and things like that.
That's what I was trying to find.
So I'll send it back out to you, but obviously you can work the Excel spreadsheet the same way. But as I understand it right now with our current enrollment, Monocacy is at 90%. AEC is at 93%. Birdsboro is at 60%. The middle school's at 69%, and the high school's at 79%. So those are the capacity ratios. In terms of the shuffling of the kids around, I just want to make sure I'm clear on this point, is that I think what I was demonstrating here is I don't know what the future is going to bring. Nobody does. We're doing our best to take a look at what enrollment's going to be going forward. And what my suggestion is that, and it's always been since I've sat on this board, is we need to do long-term planning as well as short-term planning. And we need to constantly be revisiting these numbers every year. So next year we look at enrollments again going forward, and the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that. I don't know if in 2017 population is going to spike, and that means we're opening buildings. I don't know that. But I'm looking at the trends since 2009, and we're losing 100 students a year, and it's been consistent. It seems to be backed up by the information from PDE, as well as our own analysis of what's happening, and it's reflected in other school districts as well in our area. And so I don't see why talking about this issue, I think it's quite frankly, it's a responsibility as a school board to discuss it. I mean, and I guess the question for the board and the public can think about this as well, is at what point, in terms of enrollment, do you close a building? Do you wait till you get to 2,000 students before you close a building? Do you wait till you get to 1,000? I mean, like, what's the number? And I don't know what that number is. I'm just looking at the data. And I looked at the history that we had with this particular building, and it was clear that from the start, there was no need to reopen the building when we renovated it. We didn't have the need for it. We had capacity in other buildings to absorb those children. We did it for a year, and those children are still now in those other buildings. So, I'm presenting that question again for the board and for the public. Looking at the numbers and where we are today, at what point do you talk about closing another building? I mean, I guess that's the question I have for people. So, if you have thoughts on that as well, that's great. But I think the only way you get to that answer is you got to go through the process. You got to do the due diligence. You got to sit down, and the business office needs to roll up its sleeves and start working through the numbers. Our administrative staff has to go around and take a look at the buildings and how they're being used and where we have vacancies.
I agree with you, Chris, but my bottom line point is, we're doing it again at crunch time. So we have the certain dates we have to adhere to. So instead of bringing this up, a few months ago, and maybe doing our due diligence like you said we should, now we're in this compressed timeline. I don't know if it's going to be justice in doing it right.
Okay.
I think that this year, I think that the discussion is based more on enrollment numbers, which I believe is more proactive than what we were discussing last year. Just to start that off, I think and that was the discussion last year, the building closure should be based on what enrollment numbers dictate, not whether or not a building needs maintenance. So I am glad to see that we're moving forward in that direction. We have been talking about it for months. I think my understanding of the hearing is it's not a vote to close the school. It's a vote that we could close the school if the data flushes out that we should. I think we should also be looking at, honestly, as a board, in that process, if we don't do it this year and it's next year, but because I don't think we'll have time this year, but we should be looking at what is the next building to close, and we should be planning that process out. And honestly, I think we should have, it wasn't my suggestion, it was another board member on Summit, but we should have a policy in place that says when you hit this number, that you start the process, so that it's not a gut emotional reaction every time it happens. It's a thought out, it's a planned out process, and yes, there's always issues with closures, there's issues with anything that we do, but we are trying to provide the best education to the students with the dollars that we have, and it would be nice if the community and the board could work together to solve those problems, because complaining doesn't fix the problem. Complaining doesn't make money fall out of the sky. So we have to try to work together to solve the issues, not just complain.
I have a lot of thoughts. In part, I agree with all three of you. I mean, back to Mr. Basil's point, we do have a fiduciary responsibility as a board to look at what buildings we have, what buildings we need. I still remember a woman speaking as a member of the public 2 years ago that challenged the board that you're real estate rich and dollar poor, and we are. But on the other hand, my understanding of the intent of this meeting tonight was to have a voting meeting afterward to vote on whether to have a hearing to close a building for September. And frankly, I don't think we possibly can do that. I'll say the same thing I said about kindergarten. I just don't think there's enough time to study the data and make an informed decision. What personally I would like to see, let me go back to what Mr. Basil said. I don't disagree that we need to look at closing buildings if necessary. If the enrollment declines, as that pale blue line up there indicates, if that continues, I mean, we don't have much choice. What building, again, should be dictated, as Mr. Radowski said, by data, not emotion, not politics, just data. Mr. Small and I have been going to township meetings. We haven't been to Birdsboro, but I can tell you that Amity the other night announced that they received a check from was $900,000 for EDUs from the Schmale Farm to build 291 units. Whether that'll happen this year, next year, or the year after, I have no idea, but somebody spent $900,000 to buy these permits. Union Township, we were told that Union Green, I believe, was going to add 40 more units, and then somewhere near the golf course add 200 units of townhomes, which usually have a lot of kids in them. Again, I don't know when, but our enrollment may or may not continue the steep decline that it has, and that's what I think we need to look at. Personally, I'd like to see something along the line of what Mr. Radowski said about a policy that states if we hit this enrollment, this is what will happen, and then we'd have to hold the public hearing and have the cooling off period and all that. But my thought is, when we start talking in the Finance Committee meetings, as Mr. Rathkip said, we were talking 16, 17, or 17, 18 without a placeholder. And really to do a study on what this residential growth is going to be and what the enrollment is going to be and what the savings would be. I think as a board, I think we should look at 17, 18. Now I realize we're missing out on some savings, but I'd rather do that than do it wrong. If I read your proposal correctly in the paper, it's that we would close Monocacy now, and if enrollment continued to decline, we would reopen Monocacy and then close Birdsboro. And even me, who is very fiscally conservative and wants to save money, I think that's just too much back and forth. I can't support that. Your other proposals, 5th grade going to the middle school, I have no problem with that. I mean, I went to Brookfield School. We had all 8 grades in one building. And as I said to one resident that I was talking to about it, your 5th grader being with a 6th grader this year, last year that was the 4th grader with the 5th grader in the elementary school. So I think that can be overcome and be adjusted to. I also think we have capacity in the middle school that we're not seeing right now, and I know we have capacity in the high school we're not seeing now. So I think there's a lot of study to be done. And in my mind, if we can close a building or buildings in 2017-18, I'd be fine with it. Back to what I said about Monocacy and Birdsboro, right now, if you look strictly at capacity, not just usage, but capacity, according to capacities, we could close Birdsboro now and move everything into Monocacy. I'm not saying it fits, but just looking at it on paper, the numbers sort of dictate that it can. That's why I say I think we need a lot more study. But that's my thought on it.
So I guess the question then for the committee then is one of how do we move forward? If everybody's in agreement, and I think we're all for an agreement that we need to study the issue, we need to make a recommendation to the board so that our administration can allocate the time to do this. I've been around long enough where suggestions have been made and then they get tabled and 3 years, 4 years go by where those initiatives aren't followed through on. So I would want to make sure, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I want to make sure that we are following through on the issue and we are doing the study and we are doing the analysis so we can get the information we need to get that done. Typically a timetable moves that process forward. The lack of a timetable, it's dead in the water.
Well, starting with the growth, I think we need to go back to the townships and ask, when are the developers actually going to break ground, if ever? Talking to Ms. Twardowski, she said when she lived in Union Township, they were talking about building these 200 homes, and they haven't done it. The Schmel Farm, I've probably heard about that since I moved here 11 years ago. So we need to find out a groundbreaking date to see if it's actually going to happen, or is it just conjecture? That's part of it. I think the business office needs to do an in-depth study of exactly what it would save, and save above and beyond. I mean, at the last Curriculum and Instruction Committee meeting, we talked about financial savings by a reduction in the number of teachers due to the declining enrollment. So that savings should be separate from the building closure savings, because that should happen anyway. The building closure savings should be administrative and custodial, basically, and utilities. So, I mean, how we would draw up the timeline, I think that's something the business office should draw up a timeline then for us to review and approve.
Also, as Mr. Martinez said at the last board meeting, I mean, we still need to have a discussion on full-day kindergarten. That would impact, what the capacity, if the board decides that we're not going back that way, or we do a modified program, or we go back to all full-day. Obviously, that's going to impact the building need as well.
Mhm.
So, I don't know if it's a good project that once we get our budget done and Mr. Small is able to, he has a couple other things burning right now. We have some contracts that are coming up. We have the health insurance trust. We have several things. So maybe is that a good thing to do during the summer? And then we have a report come back to us in the fall.
I guess my thoughts would be that if we give it a timetable for closure, for possibility of closure for the next school year, and we had the data sometime in the fall, I think that would give us time to not rush it, time to have that in budget presentation. I think you can look at the full-day kindergarten at the same time. I mean, obviously we'll be talking about that later tonight, but I don't know that the board's ready to vote to bring full-day kindergarten back for this coming year either, so maybe that can be looked at in tandem and how it would affect building closure, if any. And I'll be honest, I know the economy's recovering, but like Mr. Martinez said, I don't worry too much about the new developments. They're not all going to come at once. I sold $11 million of sewer capacity in 2004 in New Hanover Township, and probably about 200 units have been built in the last 10 years. And you're right, I approved Union Green when I started the Union Municipal Authority in 2005, I think. So development is going to come and go, and like Mr. Basil said, if you see all of a sudden, the developers are building a house a week in every development, you're still going to have time to open a school. So I would be looking at it for the next year, and I think we just have we have time frames based on that.
You have some input? Yeah, absolutely.
My question would be, would you like the administration to begin looking at a true middle school concept of 5 through 8, which is not uncommon, but that would take a year at least of planning so that we made sure that the students could move into the proper area of the school, make sure that the space is allotted properly, and really do a true middle school concept of being able to continue the teaming, because middle schoolers don't stay like in a self-contained classroom. So I know that Mr. Hurley probably has experience with that already. I know that we could bring somebody else in at no charge to help make that move, but that way the parents would have a year. So if you tell me what year that you're thinking, I'm looking at the capacity, 1,100 students would be the total number of bodies. I'm looking at bodies, I'm sorry. I look at bodies and seats opposed to the capacity. And to make sure that we would be able to support them with our special education classrooms, make sure that the reading specialists are still there, have their spot. They also require a lot of technology now because a lot of things are done through the labs, or do we change out the labs and do we start to prepare and get carts so that we're not utilizing those rooms necessarily? Because right now we have 4 computer labs in that building because of the number of students that are in there. So if that's the direction that you want the administration to take for the next year to properly prepare, or is it 2 years out, you more or less have to direct us.
Yeah, I think my intent was to get people looking at this and think long-term, right? Because if the curve was going the other way and our population was going up to 10,000 students, for sure everybody would be mobilizing and talking about building plans, acquiring ground, developing new schools, all that kind of stuff, right? And we'd be planning for the future in that direction. But a declining enrollment is something we also have to plan for. And that conversation, it's a multifaceted discussion. 5th grade into a 5 through 8 model in terms of our middle school. How does that impact our busing? Does that require redistricting? We have excess capacity at the high school, so is that something where you're moving 8th grade up? I don't know. I don't know the answers to these things. But we need to be aware of this, and if the trend continues, this administration and this community needs to be prepared for what may happen, which is the closure of buildings if this trend continues. If it reverses itself or stabilizes, maybe it doesn't. But people have to have an open mind to this discussion and be thinking about this long term. And I think to the degree that we can get our administrative staff working on this and be analyzing what, if we reach a level of, we're at 3,500 students now. Last year, we were supposed to be at 3,570 or something like that at this point in time. So the revision of Mr. Selmenridge's forecast actually has our enrollment decreasing at a faster rate than what we thought it was. I think that administratively, you guys need to be having a conversation internally about, well, if we get to 3,200 students, what does that mean we're doing with our buildings? And if we get to 3,000 students, what does that mean that we're doing with our buildings? And how we best use the assets that we have. And it may mean some shuffling of students, around. I don't know what that's going to look like, but clearly, I think if you're looking at a phased closure, which buildings would you close first, and where would the students ultimately, if you're looking at a long-term plan, where would you ultimately consolidate our student body? It seems to make sense to me to be the 3 biggest schools that we have.
Mrs. Torsion, answer your question. I threw 2 years out, but as far as a tentative plan, if you were to move 5th grade, I think you should have that ready for the coming school year, so we would know, at least have the data for 16 and 17.
For 16, 17.
Mr. Small, do you have any input in terms of timeline and allocation of your resources of the business office to do the due diligence?
Well, I agree with setting the threshold. I like the concept of having a policy in place. In terms of the threshold, I think the 17, 18 is as we discussed for 6 months, 4 months now, is more realistic. We can certainly shoot for the 16, 17. With the amount of data that we can put in together the last 4 months, we can certainly move forward. The big piece is
Lauren, excuse me, I know you can't hear you in the back.
the big piece is the personnel issue, which I would have to, Mike and I would want to sit with the administrative team. This is Portia, and that's going to take some time to really put together. She was just saying, if you want a 5 to 8 plan, you're a plan and you're doing it. I'm looking at 1 to 2 years.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Comments? Okay. Questions or comments from the crowd? Don't everybody rush up at once. Please state your name and your address.
My name is Elizabeth
You
Wise.
can push the button on there and it should turn a red light on. There you go.
My name is Elizabeth Wise, and my address is 210 West Welsh Drive, Bellisville, PA. And I heard a lot tonight, and I just want to point out that there is another thing to consider, which is very important, and that is children's health and safety. So therefore, moving forward, please consider that there is concerns with mold and poor air quality in the Birdsboro School. And it will be having air quality testing done in the spring, and it has been confirmed that it is an issue enough to be addressed. So therefore, please take that into consideration, because if you're not a healthy child, you can't run it.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm sorry I had to leave. I might have missed some of it, but I have some questions. My name's Steve Miller, 600 Ridge Drive in Amity. I'm curious as to where your numbers have come from for the projections, where you're getting your information from, if you have sources that they decide.
Yeah, the business office pulled those numbers, the statistics from birth rates and Department of Health. I'll let you guys answer where you got the numbers from for that.
Birth certificate, birth counts came from the Department of Health, the Department of Health. Population statistics came from the PA State Data Center. And enrollment data came from PD.
And they're current as of a couple years ago?
It is based on the year. It is what it is. If it says 1213, that was the population at 1213.
Oh, the census is out of date?
Yeah, they're not. If it's data, it's not projections. It's not estimates. It's just data.
No, I was just wondering how current the data was.
Current. Pulled. Just pulled it for the presentation.
No, but when they collected the data, they didn't do a survey last week of the population.
I can't tell you exactly when they did the surveys.
I think what he's telling you is that the data that he pulled from different sources was current up through 1213. And then what they did was, I don't know if you missed it, and we'll put this up on the website for people to take a look at, but there's a multiplier that's used, a statistical multiplier that's used for projecting forward in terms of your projections. So you take the current data and then you project it forward based on an attrition rate, I guess is the best way to describe it. And that multiplier then forecasts what your enrollment will be going forward for those different class years. Our business manager last year, Kim Seldridge, applied the same methodology. And I think if you take a look at the presentation, not only does it back up our current decline in enrollment in terms of the statistics, but it also happened to mesh with what was being provided by PDE for enrollment numbers for the general area of Berks County as well as our school district.
Okay, thank you.
But we'll have all that data available for you guys to take a look at.
Yeah, I'm just curious, students transferring out of the school district for one reason or another, but still living in the area, is that accounted for?
Yes, I think I understand your question now. Everything, any date up to 1415 is actual data, and the enrollment data used for this year was 2/28/15, the most recent for the school district. Any data given for 2015, 16, and beyond was strictly a projection or estimate, which could change.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bridget Skoniak from 2114 Beavertown Road in Douglasville, or in Amity. I appreciate you taking a minute to listen to me. I just have a couple questions. I'm glad to hear that you went to the township meeting and talked with them about development and everything. I wonder, what is our board doing along with our township as far as attracting new people to come and live in our areas to bring that number up? Because when I moved here, I was excited and happy that I did my research online, and like the student-teacher ratio was small, which is not the case anymore, and it will not be going forward if we keep squeezing these kids into the schools together. And I think that if we did keep it smaller, we'd attract more people. I mean, we want people to come and be in our district, and we want the children, we want the parents to bring their kids here to be educated. Now, with the taxes so high and with the classrooms so crowded, it's hard to attract new buildings, new builders to come here and bring more people to live here. So I'm just wondering, how can we all work together to bring more development, to bring more tax dollars, to take care and close up the holes that are here, and try to help fix it instead of patching it? And then, or go ahead and you can tell me if there's anything that I don't see.
Well, I can tell you that I think that the information you have up here is in a decline in overall population. I think it is a decline in birth rates. So you don't have we have a spreadsheet where we break down not only enrollment per year and per building, but by class. And we had two population bubbles that kind of came through the school district a number of years ago. And one of them has already graduated, and the next batch is, I think, in what, 8th, 9th grade now?
Our largest batch is right now is in 8th grade.
In 8th grade.
Yeah.
So, and 8, 9 years ago, you know, when that second population boom started coming in, that's when we started building schools. Okay, and those kids are now in 8th, 9th grade. When I look at the numbers, it seems to me it's just, you know, birth rates have fallen off. A lot of kids have grown up. People are still in place in their homes. And, you know, so the housing stock hasn't turned over to bring in new families and more kids and those types of things. That's just my personal observation. There is, as Mr. Martino pointed out, housing on the books already in Union Township and in Amity Township. There's really no other place to build in Birdsboro. But, you know, it takes a long time to build 200 or 300 houses.
Well, I understand that, but my question is more, the developer's not going to want to come and invest and build these houses if people like us aren't going to want to move here because the overcrowded classrooms and the money problems.
Well, I can tell you that the school district has provided tax abatement for businesses in Birdsboro. We recently passed an overlay district to incentivize, I think it was the Dollar General, and I don't know if Mr. Doty's here, he can speak to it. But a couple other businesses, so that we are bringing new business into the community. Amity Township had a business park as well, when we agreed that we work hand in glove with them to inspire businesses to come in and build in the business park. We're definitely looking to make the school district an attractive place and work with the local municipalities to allow that to happen.
But what did we do to like you just said, hand in glove, what did we do, or what did you do as a board to work with the township to attract that business?
Let me ask you, what would you suggest we do?
I'm wide open, I don't know, but I'm glad to help. I'm going to jump in
Well, I think
and help to do
the
it.
best thing that we can do to the school district, as you indicated, is to provide tax relief. And we have a very high millage rate. A lot of businesses are spending a lot of money, and residents are spending a lot of money to own a home or to build a business here. And if they can go a mile one way and be in Pottstown or North Coventry, or a mile the other direction and be in Exeter, where they have, more favorable tax rates, then they're going to move in those directions. So we've done what we could when requested with the townships to work with them. We go to the meetings. I've met with the township supervisors. We've asked them, do you have suggestions for us and how we can help you? And when they've had, we've sat right behind them. We've gone up to the courthouse when they were arguing. I think it was Amity Township was making a case with the county to get the zoning that they were looking for. for the industrial park, and we supported them 100%.
So just
And let
my,
me tell you some other things though, because you talked about more tax revenue. Amity Township at the meeting last week, because we go to not only the supervisor meeting, but the planning commission meetings. They announced that the Flatley tract on Amity Park Group is now going to be turned into a retirement village with age-restricted housing. So that's all tax revenue with no children, adding to the need for school buildings. So if and when that's built, that can be money. People, since before I moved here, when I first met my wife, I saw the signs, don't build a racetrack, but there's a potential tax generator in a racetrack in Union Township if it's ever open. Mr. Doty told me today that there's been a contract let with the Armor Cast building in Birdsburg to sell that. It's going to be all corporate and industrial, but again, that's tax revenue. But to come back to Amity, we've been to several meetings where they've talked about a corporate center on Limekiln Road. I mean, it's already zoned properly and everything else. The developers, and people think it's just me that I don't want to raise taxes. The developers will tell you they don't want to build here because our tax rate is so high. And that is keeping businesses out of here, and businesses is what's going to help us control our taxes. So it's a catch-22. Now, Amity they had some kind, and I forget the exact term, but it was a traffic impact fee that was like $2,000 a unit that they lowered to $900 to help attract business. Now, I haven't seen anything built lately, but it's a possibility. So there's stuff on the books, but as Mr. Basil and Mr. Dowski said, being on the books and breaking ground could be two different things.
Mike, just really quick, so thank you so much, both of you. I understand that as a parent, if I were looking to move somewhere, two of the top things I would look at are the schools, because I have young children, and the taxes, and the schools, and their scores, and the student-to-teacher ratio would be above the taxes for me. I don't know about other people, but I'm just saying that don't get too overcrowded here with our kids, because every single decision that you make affects our kids every day. I don't know what the student-teacher ratio is for your children, but mine just seems to be bursting every single year. The one last thing that I have a question about, and I don't know too much about it, so I don't want to sound ridiculous, but when we look at like the pensions for all of teachers administration, is that always going to happen? Will that always be there? Because I don't understand why, like in regular business, we pay, like I have my 401k and I pay into my retirement. I don't understand why our tax dollars have to pay for future retirement if people are going to work every day just like we are.
That's a much more involved question. I'm not sure we're going to have time for, but the pension system in the state of Pennsylvania is outside of the control of the school district. That's something the state legislature has to take care of, and our governor. But it's a guaranteed pension. So a number of years ago, the pension money was invested and it lost. I think it was at a third of its value. And as a result of that, the taxpayers are required to make it up.
We have to direct that to Wolf and say why. Because I lost a lot of money with that too, but I don't have anybody paying it for me. So I don't understand why.
You're preaching to the choir, I can assure you that. So
All right.
Every year the legislature says we have a pension issue, and every year they do nothing about it. So
Well, I
that's where you're at.
don't like that that's a financial thing that we're worried about here when we're talking about
Unfortunately,
our
our part
children.
of the state, there's a defined contribution and defined benefit. Defined benefit is a pension. When you join a pension, you're guaranteed, you work 70 years, and then they look at, all these factors, and you're guaranteed X number of dollars for as long as you live. Whereas a defined contribution like a 401k plan, it's up to you how much you put into that. It's your contribution, and usually your employer does some matching, but it's on your shoulders. Whereas the pension, the state has promised,
Yeah, I
and their promise is
understand
to
that.
keep.
But our
in the
pension is
regular
also,
real
our pension is
world,
based on salaries, right? So salaries drive ultimately what we as a school district pay in pension costs. So we've had a very generous contracts for the last 6 years, and there's a cost for that. And we'll be negotiating contracts going forward and doing the best we can to mitigate, those pension liabilities going forward. But clearly, a big chunk of this is it's HR, and that's where the savings come from when you close a building.
well, it's affecting our kids, that's why I'm upset about
I
it.
agree with you.
And all the companies that I'm aware of in business have gotten rid of pensions 40 and 50 years ago. So I don't understand why our government is why this.
Conversation with your state representative.
Okay, no, that's fine, I didn't know.
I'm going to try to
what level you
get a
guys
couple
had.
more people in here before we're going to have to close it.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Kristen Elagash, 201 Loyalstock Drive. I've actually emailed several of you on the board already. And so I want to thank you for your time for reading our emails. All the community, because I recognize a lot of faces here. I know that they've sent a lot of concerns in too. So I just have a few quick points. First off, I want to say that 90% capacity is, I think, at the max where we should really be doing a cutoff for the amount of kids that we run in a classroom, considering the fact we just moved here 2 years ago. We came from Allentown School District. We were at 100% capacity. We had more children than we had desks. We had children sharing books. We had 30 plus in the classroom. Right now, my children have a wonderful classroom environment because they have a smaller teacher-to-child ratio. There's not as many learning interruptions because there's less children for the child and for the teacher to deal with. So as the child progresses, the teacher can progress, and there's not 5 children or 10 children or 15 children that have to be pushed forward or backwards to be able to make sure that they're getting the proper learning. So I want to make the point that 30 kids is a lot of kids, and we came from that. The 22 to 25 that we have in our classroom environments now are a huge difference. So when you want to say you want to close something because they hit the 90%, think about keeping it open, doing your research, seeing what the projected population is going to be in the next 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, what development is going to add into your population. I know just on my street alone and on my block alone and from the Moms Club, we have lots of little ones, toddlers, 2, 3, 4 years old. They're coming into kindergarten. They deserve full-day kindergarten if you can do that. We push to get that done. Our community isn't just based on our house sales and our children's education. It's not one thing or another. It all comes together as one. Because when our child starts going to a school that has too many people in it, they're over capacity or they're suffering. They're not getting as much individual attention or as good of an education as we can give them. What happens then? Our community as a whole starts to fall apart. Our houses go up for sale. People don't want to buy, especially new families, because they look at our district and go, there are too many student-to-child ratios, too many teacher-to-child ratios. There is so many other factors. The school environment has been unstable. You already have a merger, and it was a big uprising last year. A lot of people didn't even know about it until afterwards. A lot of people were not happy with it. And now you want to move the kids again. You realize that every time you make a big jump like this, it goes in the papers. It makes people reevaluate where they want to be, if this community is for them, which affects everybody as a whole. I alone can give you a list of 10 children that I know, and we don't know a lot of people because we just moved here, that have been affected by this so badly that their parents put their house on the market, moved, and sold their house within this last year. Or they were renting and they moved out of the district because they felt like it was unstable. And on top of that, there are those that actually put their kids in private school or a parochial school. They found other avenues. So every time you talk about population decline, you have to think about not just how it's going to affect our community and our housing development and our businesses and our child's emotional and mental and maturity, their well-being. Think about how it affects everything as a whole, for the fact that you're not just seeing population decline due to us not having as much birth ratio as compared to how many years ago. you also are bringing about a population decline by the decisions that you're making on this board.
Thank you.
My last comment of the night would be, we would like to see this go a little bit slower. We appreciate the numbers, because I know a lot of people are asking, where is this data coming from? Have you done a population study, not just going to the Department of Education and things like that? Have you walked around with a survey? Have you done your due diligence, like you said, you kept an open mind? Have you gone neighborhood to neighborhood and get an idea of how many kids are actually in that, coming up in the next 3 years in these schools? And then, if that's the factor, and we still have a population issue, instead of putting our 5th graders into middle school, do what other districts have done. And utilize the extra room we have in Birdsboro, in Monocacy, and Amity. Combine them, if you need to merger them, do K to 2 or 2 to 4, and then 4 to 6. Put our 6th grade back in elementary school. Let our kids be innocent and less mature for a little bit longer, because it is a culture shock when newly 5th graders get put into an environment with 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. I'm a younger
I'm going to have to cut you off here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Shane Cockle, 830 Geigertown Road. There's 2 things I wanted to bring up. One is the development. It was, I think, in 2012, the state of Pennsylvania granted an automatic time extension to all developers. Next year, 2016, that automatic time extension is going to end, which means developers are going to be responsible to start developing. You haven't seen anyone coming into anything with development plans or anything like that, because they have an automatic time extension. Those townships every 3 months or every 6 months require the developer to come in, show that they're working on their plans, what they're doing. If they're close to their final stage, they have to prove that they're working on that in order to get a time extension. That's going to end next year. So throughout the entire state of Pennsylvania, you're going to have developers required to go into their townships, their municipalities, and show either that they're working on still developing the plan, or they have to start building. So that would be something to look at. The second thing is, we all complained about, how we got to this stage, building buildings. Did anyone go look at what the other school board did to all of a sudden decide, okay, we're at X amount of students, we're going to have to build another building? Maybe that might be an easier number to swallow for the community if you can show, back, when you built the Monocacy building, or this building, or not this building, the Amity, that there was X amount of students. That wasn't enough for our school buildings, so we needed to build a new building.
Yeah, I can tell you, I asked for that information in 2008 when I got on the board, and nobody could find it. So if we can find it now, 7, 8 years later, I'd be happy to see it, but I'm not optimistic.
Well, if we had a yearbook, it'll show all the students in the buildings.
Yeah.
So you can get the numbers. It might
Well,
be a little bit harder.
we have the historical data right here.
No, what I'm saying is, when that number hits the number where, the 3 buildings was big enough to educate all the students at the time.
Oh, yeah, I mean, we know when that is. I mean, we can go back and look at the data.
Okay. Are we close to those numbers?
We're getting there, yeah. It's about 2,800 students. So within 5 years, we'd be looking at being back where we started.
So in 5 years?
That's what we're showing here.
Okay. So you do have the numbers of students that we had when we didn't have the new Monocacy building. How about the new middle school?
Yeah,
Okay.
right here.
Okay.
Pre-AIC, pre-MEC. 1999, we had like 2,900, 2,700 students, something like that.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just going to let the public know we're almost at 7:30, so this will be our last commenter. We have a meeting that starts at 7:30. You can make comments at that meeting as well. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Leslie Martuski, and I live at 408 Harmony Lane. I would like to say I have 3 children in the district of all different ages, so kindergarten will affect us, high school next year will affect us, and I have a 4th grader this year. I do not think that saying that, making the comparison, I went to a parochial school that's K to 8, is any comparison to a middle school, to a public middle school. I think the culture in a K through 8 school is different than the culture in a middle school. I have a child in middle school. I think the middle school is absolutely wonderful. I am not the least bit thrilled about the idea of sending my 10-year-old here next year. I think some of the little things I don't think you kind of get. I mean, this school is for little kids. AEC, APC, they're for little kids. You go to middle school, they have the expectation, okay, you're not little kids anymore, now you know, this is the way it is. Little things like recess. 5th graders have recess. 6th graders don't have recess. 5th graders don't go to school dances. 6th graders go to school dances. So I've heard Mrs. Torsha ask the board, give me a time frame so that we can prepare to go to middle school, but I haven't heard anyone ask Mrs. Torsha, how long do you need to get the middle school to where it would be an appropriate school for 5th graders? And that would be my question.
Okay.
How long would that take? And reason, I don't think September is really enough time to do that.
Well, I think you heard from the Finance Committee tonight that there would not be a recommendation to the full board for a September start date or to start this process. What we're then doing is we're shifting gears to when would be an appropriate time, what threshold do we implement a plan like this, how long is it going to take it to put a plan together, what are the considerations, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of schools out there that have a 5 through 8 model, and we can look to talk to those schools and find out how they make it work for them and their community. So there's a lot of due diligence and research to do, and this is just, we're at the very beginning of this process. So thank you for your comments, appreciate that. Okay. We'll bring this meeting to a close. We can start with the regular board meeting. Mr. Martino.
Mr. Bates, before we adjourn this meeting, I think a lot of the people are here because we were going to vote on holding whether to hold a hearing, a public hearing or not to close the building. Based on what I heard the Finance Committee recommend, it seems to me we're not going to vote on that, or are we still going to vote on it?
Oh, I don't see that there's going to be a recommendation from the Finance Committee to vote on that.
That's what I'm saying.
So the board can decide at the board meeting what they want to do, but I don't see 4 people sitting here voting for that.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
All right. This meeting is adjourned.